Helena Blavatsky. This woman is a most interesting scholar indeed. The more that I learn about her, the more I like. Now, she's been vilified all over YouTube as some sort of Luciferian. But from what I've learned by reading her books, she's anything but that. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky was a Russian-German aristocrat born in 1831. If she has this aristocratic royal blood, it's highly likely she had a high amount of Chronide blood in her. Now, that should give you an idea of why she was hated right there. Because this Chronide bloodline from Zeus has been hunted down and exterminated off. Also, this woman traveled the world to gain knowledge, which was very unusual for the time. During the time that she lived in the 19th century or 1800s, there was a movement called Spiritism that was taking hold. Now, Spiritism was a spiritualistic philosophy that began in the 19th century by a French educator, Hippolyte Léon Denisard Rivel, under the codename Allan Kardec. It was the study of the nature, origin, and destiny of spirits and their relation with the corporal world. And Spiritism spread all over the world. And it ended up having an international Spiritist council. Of course, everything about it was denounced as satanic, but the people of the 19th century wanted to have some answers. They began to study things that perhaps the church wasn't too happy about. Now, Helena Blavatsky got in on it and tried to figure out what was going on as well. And she did a lot of studying as far as these spiritual movements and gurus. And in the end, she seems to have denounced most of it. So she just didn't go along with anything that was given to her. She actually went in and studied things for herself and tried to figure out what was going on. And as I said, she traveled the world and she studied Hinduism and Buddhism and the Abrahamic religions and this new movement on Spiritism and the esoteric and occult. Now, she was said to have found a library from her maternal great-grandfather that had many books in it that were occultic. And she came from a family with Freemasons as well. So she was a very well-read and learned woman, highly intellectual. Now, that's her intelligence side, but she also had a strong temperament that was unusual for women of that day. And some even say she had some spiritual gifts as well. Well, many said that. But her goal in life was to study religion, the nature of the world, the nature of the soul, and to learn about it and make sense of it. And she studied science as well and the church doctrine. And if you read her books, not just listen to what they blindly say online, they pretty much repeat what everybody else is saying, you'll find out that what she wrote about is not typically what they say she was doing. Now, in her first book, Isis Unveiled, she wrote, quote, "Our work, then, is a plea for the recognition of the Hermetic philosophy The anciently universal wisdom religion is the only possible key to the absolute in science and theology. To show that we do not at all conceal from ourselves the gravity of our undertaking, we may say in advance that it would not be strange if the following classes should array themselves against us. The Christians who will see that we question the evidence of the genuineness of their faith. The scientists who will find their pretensions placed in the same bundle with those of the Roman Catholic Church for infallibility, and in certain particulars, the sages and philosophers of the ancient world classed higher than they. Pseudoscientists will, of course, denounce us furiously. Broad churchmen and freethinkers will think that we do not accept what they do, but demand the recognition of the whole truth. Men of letters and various authorities who hide their real belief in defense of popular prejudices. The mercenaries and parasites of the press, who prostitute its more than royal power and dishonor a noble profession, will find it easy to mock at things too wonderful for them to understand. For to them, the price of a paragraph is more than the value of sincerity. From many will come honest criticism, from many can't, but we look to the future. The contest now going on between the party of public conscience and the party of reaction has already developed a healthier tone of thought. It will hardly fail to result ultimately in the overthrow of error and the triumph of truth. We repeat again, we are laboring for the brighter tomorrow, and yet we consider the bitter opposition that we are called upon to face. Who is better entitled than we, upon entering the arena, to write upon our shield the hail of the Roman gladiator to Caesar? Mortuoris te salutet. Okay, she wrote Isis Unveiled in 1877. It was published in 1877. And then she went on to write The Secret Doctrine, which was based allegedly on a mysterious book of Dizan that described the previous races of humanoids on this planet, including our current race, the Aryan race, and prior to that, a race of giants. Prior to that, a race of androgens, and two previous races that were more egg layer and ethereal. She predicted two more races of humans to come. Now, Helen was called many things, and one of them included being called an anti-Semite. And unfortunately, as I study things, it's starting to become more apparent that there's a pattern to a lot of these people from the past that are defamed, and their work is pushed to the side, and they're called a Luciferian or a this and that when they were anything but. Now, Helen was a very, very well-disciplined person. She was celibate most of her life. She had gotten married, but it was to an older man. She was 17, he was in his 40s, and that marriage didn't last after 3 weeks or so. And she had married someone briefly, and they didn't consummate the marriage, so that broke up as well. And she ended up with some male partners to help her create this Theosophy Society, but she was celibate most of her life, and she dedicated her life to learning and to studying all of these things that I just mentioned. And from everything that I've read about her, I've never seen anything that said that she was involved in some satanic ritual or something nasty along the lines that Aleister Crowley was involved in. Helen would be more of a right-hand path person. But what she wrote about angered certain people, and things that she wrote about the Jews got her labeled as an anti-Semite racist. And I think that's unfortunately one of the reasons why in the so-called truth movement, that is now really not much of anything, she was pretty much defamed. And it's the same thing with Alice Bailey, which you'll find out a lot of things about her that nobody else has talked about as I continue with subsequent videos. But Blavatsky, Helena Blavatsky, was a genius, and she was very dedicated to learning the truth. So what I thought is interesting here, and we're going to take a little bit at a time in these videos, is that if you look at her work, it's meaty. There's a lot in it. It's the way that they wrote. She talks about scholars of the time that most of us don't know about. She talks about all of the studies of the things, the religions, and the occult that she was involved in her opinion. And she gives a lot of really good information. Now, she isn't up to where and I don't want to say this in a way that's arrogant, but to where I'm at in my research as far as who was responsible for the commonality of all of these religions, because she was looking for a commonality because she believed there was a commonality, and it almost appears to me that she was looking at this Hermeticism, which came from the Egyptian Thoth, who was the counselor to Cronus. But she didn't have access to that Loeb library because it wasn't done yet. It wasn't created yet. So she didn't have access to the books that I have access to. But she was beginning to point out a lot of the things that I have figured out. And she talks about Dionysus and Zeus and all of the commonalities of the religions and how they all talked about a previous race of giants. And she talks about Prometheus, and she talks about Zeus. And she even gives information on the symbolism. She talks about the Jewish Kabbalah and their gematria, and she talks about how they got the information. She talks about how the sorcerers control elementals to create the tricks that they do. And she talks about what ghosts are, and on and on and on. And she has very good information. And she talks about ancient scholars. One of these was Paracelsus. She also talks about the Earth as a magnetic body, and understanding that is the key to levitation. Now, this is the same thing Ed Leeds Scallion talked about in his book. Ed Leeds Scallion was the builder of Coral Castle. And she talked about if you were skilled enough to change the magnetism of your body, you could levitate. And that was the secret to it, understanding that the Earth was a magnetic body and all of the things on it were magnetized to be attracted. And if you would undo that opposite, you'd be able to levitate. So she was very interesting in that respect. Now, what I find most interesting, and we're going to talk about a lot of different things here, is she reveals that who the Freemasonic Great Architect or Supreme Architect is. In her book, Isis Unveiled, she reveals the following. It says, the Demiurgus or Demiurge, artificer, the supernal power which built the universe. Freemasons derived from the word their phrase of supreme architect. The chief magistrates of certain Greek cities bore the title. Now, you know from my work that I've already proven out to you who the Demiurge is, and that is Cronus. And I have proven that out to you through the writings in the Nag Hammadi library. Now, just to reiterate, we're going to talk quickly about how I show you that the Demiurge is Cronus. Now, as I've read before from the hypostasis of the archons, we show that the Demiurge, who is Yaldabaoth, is cast down into Tartarus. I'm going to read briefly. It says, quote, "And he said to his offspring, 'It is I who am the God of the entirety.' And Zoe, the daughter of Pistis Sophia, cried out and said to him, 'You are mistaken, Sakla, for which the alternate name is Yaldabaoth.' She breathed into his face, and her breath became a fiery angel for her. And that angel bound Yaldabaoth and cast him down into Tartarus, below the abyss. Now when his offspring Sabaoth saw the force of that angel, he repented and condemned his father and his mother matter. He loathed her, but he sang songs of praise up to Sophia and her daughter Zoe. And Sophia and Zoe caught him up and gave him charge of the seventh heaven, below the veil between above and below, and he is called God of the forces, Sabaoth, since he is up above the forces of chaos, for Sophia established him." End quote. Now I want to read one more thing from this hypostasis of the archons. It says, "Now when Yaldabaoth saw him in this great splendor, and at this height, he envied him, and that envy became an androgynous product. And this was the origin of envy. And envy engendered death, and death engendered his offspring, and gave each of them charge of its heaven, and all the heavens of chaos became full of the multitudes." Now we know Cronus was tossed into Tartarus along with the Titans. We know that from Hesiod's Theogony. If I am to read briefly here, during their war, it says, "Great Olympus trembled under the immortal feet, and the Lord setting out, and the land groaned. Heat from both of them seized the violent sea. From thunder and lightning, from the monster's fire, from searing winds, and from the fiery lightning bolt, the whole earth was boiling, and the sky and sea great waves raged around and over the coast. From the immortals' attack, an endless rumbling arose. Hades, lord of the dead below, trembled, and so did the Titans around Cronus and Tartarus, from the endless noise and awful war." Okay, so we know that Cronus is the Demiurge. So now I've just revealed to you that even Helena Blavatsky revealed that the Demiurge is the Great Architect, which is the Freemason God. Now, if you look at Wikipedia under Great Architect of the Universe, it refers to as Great Architect of the Universe or Supreme Architect of the Universe. And as I said, it's usually shown as a white man with a compass. And even in Wikipedia, it says the concept of the Demiurge as a grand architect or a great architect also occurs in Gnosticism and other religious and philosophical systems. Well, Gnosticism is basically what the Nag Hammadi library is. it goes on and talks about Christianity. It says, St. Thomas Aquinas said in the Summa, God, who is the first principle of all things, may be compared to things created as the architect is to things designed. John Calvin, in his Institute of the Christian Religion, repeatedly calls the Christian God the architect of the universe, also referring to his works as architecture of the universe, and in his commentary on Psalm 19, refers to the Christian God as the great architect, or architect of the universe. Okay, that is Cronus. He was a real person that lived over 15,000 years ago, and his son was Zeus, who is Jupiter Sabazius. Now, do you understand that you have been put into this system for 2,000 years? Because before that, everybody was a pagan, and they knew who these people were. And all of these learned men kept it to themselves, and they slowly went into everybody's culture and said everything was satanic and destroyed it and destroyed that knowledge. So only they knew it. Only they knew it. And the fact that this architect has a compass shows me that he's a builder. And what did I tell you in my studies? He was building walls around his cities. They were building cities. This guy was an architect. He was a builder. His family was a group of scientists. And it is my theory that they were remnants from a dying culture. Now, they were always referred to as giants as well. This was a different kind of race. And they were Caucasoid. Now, you can see in some of these pictures, this first one with the compass and the gentleman bending over, it says, science and particularly geometry and astronomy was linked directly to the divine for most medieval scholars. Since God created the universe after geometric and harmonic principles, to seek these principles was therefore to seek and worship God. Okay, and then look at this other picture of the Ancient of Days, a watercolor etching by William Blake. He also has the compass. And when I was in New York at the Rockefeller Center, they have the same image in Rockefeller Plaza up on the building. And below that, if you follow down in a direct line, you'll see Prometheus in his statue. And in the area, there are other sculptures. There's one of Iapetus, or you could call him Atlas as well, who would be the father of Prometheus. These people knew and know all about this hidden history. And for this not to be known in today's day and age is just criminal. There's no excuse anymore. There's no excuse that I'm not, put up in an avenue to disseminate this information. Because with knowledge there's power, and by keeping you ignorant, you're a slave. This is the club, and you're not in it, and they don't want you to be in it. But why did they hate Helena Blavatsky? Well, her books were telling this information. She was beginning to disseminate it to the public. She wasn't fully where my stuff was, but it definitely was getting there. As I said, she didn't have access to the Loeb Library like I did, or the British Library. She may have had some books out of the British Library, but she was getting close. She was getting very close. She was beginning to see the commonality in all the religions and mythologies. She suspected that there was a common religion long ago, but she didn't put it together the way I have where I actually tell you who these people were, what time they lived, what they did, where they traveled, where their bloodlines are, and I break down every secret society that basically goes back to these Cronides and their mystery schools. All roads lead to the Cronides. And this is where we're at. Now, prior to them, there were other races, and there was a time before them in Atlantis. Now, Helen did get into that, and she talked about how they had flying vehicles and advanced technology. 100% agree with her on that. And the Hindu texts that talk about Vimanas and back that up, as well as some of the ancient artwork. There's Zoroastrian images of their god in a flying craft. Back it up. And as I've talked about in my other presentations, these objects that these Cronides had, such as the sacred Mies and the Tablet of Destinies, gave knowledge, and they almost appeared to be some sort of computer system that was coveted, and it gave knowledge. So Helen has unfortunately been defamed online and made out to be some evil person when she was anything but. She was getting very close to the truth, and she was presenting it to the public, and she was a very intelligent woman looking at these things and able to travel around the world and gather as much information as she could and present it to the public. And her first book, Isis Unveiled, was very successful, and she was able to create the Theosophical Society. Now, I hope to present to them. I've asked them, and I'm waiting on a response, but the Theosophical Society, in my opinion, needs to step up to the plate and continue with what Helena Blavatsky and the other founding members intended, and that was to get at the truth and to present that to the public in a big way. So this is where hopefully I can step in and help. But for now, we're starting to get a little taste of who the real Helena Blavatsky was and why she's feared and defamed online. And I have been out to the Theosophical Society once, and I'm going to show you some pictures. And there's nothing frightening about it. There's no Baphomet picture or any of that. She has a Virgin Mary statue, or they have a Virgin Mary statue out on the grounds. They have a picture of the Virgin Mary and Jesus Christ in their library. They have a wonderful library that is dedicated to Mr. Alcott, the partner of Helen. And they loan these books out to the public. If you'd like to read, you're welcome to go in there. Yes, you're welcome to go into that library and just sit down and read, because they're basically all about learning and trying to understand things. Now, Helen was very close to coming to a conclusion of why all of these religions and mythologies seem the same, but she did not have access to the Loeb Library like I do. It wasn't done yet. It wasn't even started yet. So she wasn't able to completely put everything together and come up with the story of the Cronides, but she was getting pretty darn close. And she revealed quite a few things. And so I think that's why she is feared and hated. And some other things that she was discussing, such as the races of humanoids, is probably dangerous subject areas. She talked about the current race being Aryan, the previous race being a race of giants, and prior to that, an androgynous race, which sounds very serpentine, possibly something to clue us into who the Nagas or the reptile reptoid people are that people keep talking about. And she talked about 2 previous races before that. And she predicted 2 more races to come. And she is seen as a racist because of this. Well, she was looking at the facts and presenting it as it is. And I think that these are dangerous subjects. Now, as I've shown you, this information is known by those in the club, and you're not in that club. They don't want you to know it. But it's time for the Theosophical Society to pick up what I'm doing and move things forward. And as I continue with what I'm doing, I will hopefully get things moving forward as well. But Helena Blavatsky does not deserve the defamation and anger that she's gotten online, because this woman isn't anything like this Marina Abramovic or the Satanist or Aleister Crowley, some of the demented things they're doing. She had nothing to do with that. She wanted to know what the truth was and what was going on, and she was very intelligent and scientific about it, and she was lucky enough to be able to travel the world and meet all of these people and learn about their religions and their beliefs and look at occultism as well. I mean, she would have really been classified as an anthropologist by today's standards. She just didn't have the degree. But I think that she had wonderful information in these books. They're very good to start to see how she realized there was a common thread. And she was looking for that common thread in all of these mythologies and religions. Now, in her case, she believed it was more Hermeticism out of ancient Egypt, which is from Thoth, the counselor of Cronus. But like I said, she didn't have access to that Loeb library, so she couldn't put everything together about these people being real people and the timeline between 12,000 and 25,000 years ago. And my contention is it was about 15 to 19,000 years ago. But if she had access to that Loeb library, she may have been able to bring it up to where I'm at. But she deserves a lot better, and her work, it definitely has some hidden gems. I'm going to be doing a few more videos, especially about the races that she talked about. And this should give you a pretty good flavor of who the real Helena Blavatsky was. Thank you.